Good morning, friends. Today we are going to learn about the concepts of programming. As an IT professional, you should be aware of the different approaches or different methods available to you to write your program. So we know that there exist two methods. One is called as procedure-oriented programming or POP, and the other one is known as object-oriented programming or OOP. You can write the program in either way. There are no rules that can stop you from either using the POP or the OOP method, but there are notable differences between both of them. So programmer can decide which method or which approach to take. And this is the very basic, and as an IT professional, you should be aware of the differences between them. This might be the very first question that any manager or any interviewer can ask you. So let's start looking into it, into these two approaches. So a programmer can handle the task of developing a less complex program fairly well enough with the POP method. So if a program that you have to write is less complex, then you can use the POP method. But when the program gets even more complex, if the program is of the more complex type, then the OOP method is, more efficient. If the program is complex and if we use the POP method, the whole task of the programming would get harder and will take more time. The debugging will take more time, and in such a case, OOP method provides to be much more efficient than the POP method. The highly complex program can be developed much more efficiently using the OOP method. So let's start looking into both the approaches one by one. So in the POP, the program is divided into small parts called functions. Okay, so suppose you have to write a program that takes input, and then do the calculation of that from that input, and then that program needs to print the output to the screen. So suppose you have this simple program to write. So in the POP method, what will you do? You will write functions. You will write a function. So suppose you will write 3 functions. The function A will take the input, function B will do the calculation, and the function C will it will just do the printing. So in the POP, the procedure oriented programming, the emphasis is on procedures, is on the functions, right? So I have the diagram here. So in the POP concept, we have the functions, the logic, like we are mainly focusing on the functions. You will write the functions to achieve the outcome and like that. So here in POP, importance is given to the functions rather than the data. So you just simply write your program in a set of functions, and that will complete your task that you have. So we covered 2 points, right? In POP, program is divided into small parts called functions, and in POP, importance is given to the functions rather than the data. Now coming to the third point for POP. So in the procedure oriented programming, we make use of the global data, right? Data may get passed from one function to another because we are not giving the importance to the data. So let me explain you with the help of diagram here. So in a program, you will declare the global data, and then you will write your functions. So this function 1 will have its own local data, function 2 will have its own local data, but we also have the global data that will be shared between both these two functions, right? So it will have this global data, but the problem with that global data is, there is a chance of accidental modification. Suppose the function 1 is, modifying this global data, and at the same time, someone calls function 2 that is also accessing this global data. So there is a chance of accidental modifications. So in a real world, you are writing a program for a banking application, right? So in that banking application, you do not want your functions to accidentally modify your critical information, right? So that is the one of the reasons you are not using the POP for the real world applications. For the real world application, we are using the OOP. So for the more complex and for the real world problems or the real world programs, we are using the OOP. But the less complex and where the task is simple and you are not very much concerned about the data, the POP is the language of the choice. Okay, so now coming to the object oriented programming, let's see what it offers. So object-oriented programming contains all the features of the POP, but it also have some certain extra features. We will look into it later. So in object-oriented programming, the program is divided into parts called objects. So in POP, we see that the program is divided into functions, but in OOP, the program is divided into objects. The object is very important concept here. So an object contains two things, attribute and behavior. So we will look into it in detail later on, but for now you can see like the objects are the main stumbling blocks here. So if I show you in the diagram, the OOP concept is like, we have an object A, object B and object C, and each object has its own data and functions. This is called some data, you can call it as an attribute, and functions you can call it as a behavior. So in an object-oriented programming, each object controls the data under it. It provides the proper way of hiding the data. As we see in the procedure-oriented programming, there is no importance given to the data, but here we are giving the importance to the data. And this process of having the data security and the data hiding is known as encapsulation, that we will cover later on. But now we can see the data never get passed from one object to another. If I come again to the diagram, so this particular data and function is belong to this object, this data and function belong to this object. So any modification to this data of the object A can only happen through the functions of object A. No function of object B can directly modify the data of object A. This function can call this function, and then this function will further modify this data, but this function will never directly modify this data. Okay, so in an object-oriented programming, we have the features available such as encapsulation, that is making sure that we are not doing any accidental modification to our data. Data is so much critical to us. So, but in POP we have less security and data may get passed from one function to another. It's not the case with OOP. Okay, so now coming to the last point. So in POP, the modification of a program is very difficult. If there are any changes in the program, it will be very difficult to handle those changes if we are using the POP method. So the maintenance of the program is very difficult. But in the object-oriented programming, the maintenance is very easy and the modification of the program is very easy, because objects are independent to each other. They exist independently. So if I show you, if there is any change in this object A, there will be no, you require no modification in this data and functions, because these are separate, they are independent of each other. So if anything changes here, there is no need to change anything here or here, because this function is directly simply calling this function. This function is not aware of what this function is doing inside. So if there is any change here, you only have to change here. You do not have to change anywhere else. So we have covered the basic concepts of procedure-oriented programming and the object-oriented programming, and we now understand that in POP we are focusing mainly on the functions rather than the data, while in object-oriented programming we are giving more importance to our data and we are creating the objects, right? So this was a very basic introductory session. So in my next session I'm going to explain in more detail what objects are, what classes is, and what is the features of object-oriented programming like encapsulation, inheritance, abstraction, polymorphism. So we will cover that in the next video. So for now I complete this session, and if you have any questions or any suggestions, please do not hesitate to email me at garagsaurabh786@gmail.com, or you can comment below and I'll try to respond as soon as possible. So thank you for watching this video and I'm very grateful to you. Stay in peace. God bless you. Bye bye.